Welcome to Graphing Trig Functions, Podcast 1. I'll be making 2 podcasts today. Fourth period got just a couple slides farther than period 2. Just want to catch the 2 classes up. This is probably only going to be about a 3-minute podcast, though, and then I'll go to podcast 2. All right, so vertical translation of a trig graph is how far up or down we shift the midline. So cosine and sine, those 2 graphs both oscillate around a midline. If it's not shifted, it's usually it's always y equals 0 or the x-axis. Right? So it oscillates around the x-axis. And that light gray graph is y equals sine theta. That one is oscillating around the x-axis. If we have y equals sine theta plus 3, we're going to shift our graph up 3. And so now it's going to oscillate around y equals 3. All right, so that's our midline. So our midline is just whatever our shift is. Here we have the graph of y equals cosine theta minus 5. The graph shifts down 5, and we have a new midline at y equals negative 5. So add to your notes, graph the midline as a dotted line. I have that there on the side with the asterisk. We're always going to graph our midline. The only time you don't have to graph it, graph it if it's the x-axis. All right, that's fine. You don't need to graph that. It's obvious. All right, so let's see if we can identify some vertical shifts and some midlines. And then I'm going to start podcast 2. All right, so in your head, or maybe jot it down somewhere, think of the answer to these questions. So what's the vertical shift in y equals cosine x plus 7? Okay, have it in your head, and let's see if you're right. All right, so you got your answer in your head? If you're not sure and you want more time, just pause the tape. All right, so the vertical shift is just up 7, just like the drink, 7 up 7. All right, so this value here is our vertical shift. Our graph is shifted up 7. All right, let's try another one. What is the vertical shift in y equals cosine 2x plus 1? So think of what the vertical shift is in your head. Got your answer? Well, let's see if you're right. The vertical shift is going to be up 1. So the whole graph is just going to be shifted up 1. So after we would find our new points from our amplitude and our new points from our period change, we would just take that graph and shift it up 1. All right, let's identify the vertical translation and the midline for these ones. We're not going to be graphing the functions yet. We still have some work to do with that. But we're just going to identify the vertical shift and equation of the midline. So see if you can come up with the answer for the first one. Y equals sine theta over 2 plus 1/2. Well, our vertical shift is up 1/2. And the midline is going to be y equals 1/2. It's the same as your vertical shift. Let's try the next one. So be thinking what the vertical shift in the midline is for 18. All right, now I'll give you the answer. Got the answer in your head before I go over it? Well, the vertical shift is going to be down 4. The midline is y equals negative 4. That's the line we're going to be oscillating around. And the last one there, the vertical shift is going to be up 7. And the midline is just going to be y equals 7. So there you go. That's all there is to identifying vertical shifts. Move it over a little bit. You just look to see what's added or subtracted from the whole function. And whatever the vertical shift is, that's the midline as well. That's the end of part 1. So I'm going to pick up with part 2, and both classes will watch part 2. All right, so see you on the next podcast. And the closing will be on the next podcast.